Six women, six marriages, one king, and only one escaped. This is not a metaphor. This is not dramatic exaggeration. It's literal. Of Henry VIII's 6 wives, 2 were executed, 2 died, 1 was discarded, and only 1 managed to escape alive with freedom. But here's the question almost no one asks. What was it like to live knowing your husband could have your head cut off? What was it like to sleep next to the most powerful man in England, knowing his love had an expiration date? And why, of all of them, did only 1 manage to survive marriage to the most dangerous king of the Tudor dynasty? Today, you will discover not only what happened to each of the 6 wives, but how fear, ambition, politics, and the desire for a male heir transformed marriage into a deadly battlefield. Henry VIII did not begin as a bloodthirsty tyrant. He was charismatic, athletic, cultured, charming. But something changed. Something transformed him into the king who dissolved the marriage with the Catholic Church, created a new religion, and sent 2 of his own queens to their execution. And it all began with an obsession. An heir, a son. But the story you think you know is incomplete, because behind every marriage there were palace intrigues, family manipulation, false accusations, power games, and decisions that cost lives. And at the center of it all was a question that echoed through the palace corridors. Who will be next? Throughout this video, you will meet the queen who lost everything trying to love the king, the woman who led him to break with Rome, the one who rose too fast and fell even faster, the teenager accused of treason, the ignored wife, and the only one who played the game and won. But beware, because this isn't just a story about marriage. It's a story about survival. And when we get to the 6th wife, you'll understand why she was the only one who escaped, and how her intelligence changed the fate of the English monarchy. Prepare yourself, because after this video, you'll never see the story of Henry VIII the same way again. Asterisk, brief pause. Asterisk, let's begin with the 1st wife, the woman who believed her love was unbreakable, and who was about to discover that not even a queen was safe. The year is 1509. Henry VIII ascends the throne at only 17 years old. Young, strong, adored by the people. And by his side is a woman who had already suffered more than any princess should, Catherine of Aragon. She was no stranger. She was the daughter of the powerful Spanish monarchs, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. She had been betrothed to Henry's older brother. He died. She was widowed at 16 in a foreign country. For years, he lived in political limbo, until Henry decided to marry her. At first, it seemed like a fairy tale. They were in love. Henry wrote passionate letters. He called her my dearest wife. Catherine was intelligent, cultured, and deeply religious. But there was a problem. She couldn't give the king what he most wanted, a son who would survive. Pregnancy after pregnancy ended in tragedy. Miscarriages, stillborn babies, a son who lived only a few weeks. The only survivor was a girl, Maria. Time passed, and love began to turn into frustration. Henry began to believe that God was punishing him. Why? Because Catherine had been his brother's wife. Perhaps that marriage was cursed. Perhaps it was a sin. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was just an excuse. Because in 1526, Henry met another woman, and everything changed. But before talking about her, understand what was at stake. Henry didn't just want a divorce. He wanted to annul the marriage, to declare that it should never have existed. And for that, he needed the Pope's permission. Permission that never came. And when Rome said no, Henry did something unthinkable. He broke with the Catholic Church. He created the Church of England and placed himself as its supreme head, all because of a marriage, or rather, because of his next wife. And she wouldn't be patient. She wouldn't accept being just another mistress. Say Caterina Representativa estabilidade. Ana Bolena representava fogo. Ela era diferente. Não era a beleza mais clássica da corte. Mas tinha algo mais perigoso. Inteligência, carisma, ambição e, acima de tudo, recusou-se a ser apenas amante do rei. Henry a desejava obsessivamente. Escreveu cartas intensas, quase desesperadas. Mas Ana impôs uma condição. Casamento. Ela não entregaria nada sem uma coroa. E Henry estava disposto a incendiar o mundo por ela. Foi por causa da Ana que Henry rompeu com Roma. Foi por causa dela que nasceu a Igreja Anglicana. Foi por causa dela que Catarina foi oficialmente descartada. Em 1533, Ana tornou-se reina. Grávida. A corte aguardava o herdeiro homem que justificaria tudo o caos. Nasceu uma menina, Elizabeth. A decepção foi silenciosa, mas devastadora. Henry tentou novamente. Outra gravidez. Outro aborto. A tensão aumentava. E quando o rei começou a perder o interesse, a máquina política começou a girar. Rumores, susurros, acusações, adultério, incesto, traco. Em 1536, Ana Bolena foi presa, julgada, condenada e executada na Torre de Londres. Ela havia sido reina por menos de 3 anos. A mulher que mudou a religião da Inglaterra. Perdeu a cabeça, literalmente. Mas Henry não fica de luto por muito tempo. Porque, quase imediatamente, outra mulher estava esperando. E ela parecia tudo o que Ana não era. If Catherine represented stability, and Boleyn represented fire, she was different. She wasn't the most classically beautiful figure at court. But she had something more dangerous. Intelligence, charisma, ambition, and, above all, she refused to be just the king's mistress. Henry desired her obsessively. He wrote intense, almost desperate letters, but and imposed a condition: marriage. She wouldn't give up anything without a crown, and Henry was willing to set the world on fire for her. It was because of and that Henry broke with Rome. It was because of her that the Anglican Church was born. It was because of her that Catherine was officially discarded in 1533 and became queen. Pregnant, the court awaited the male heir who would justify all the chaos. A girl was born, Elizabeth. The disappointment was silent, but devastating. Henry tried again. Another pregnancy, another miscarriage. The tension mounted, and when the king began to lose interest, the political machine began to turn. Rumors, whispers, accusations, adultery, incest, treason. In 1536, and Boleyn was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed in the Tower of London. She had been queen for less than 3 years. The woman who changed the religion of England lost her mind, literally. But Henry didn't mourn for long, because almost immediately another woman was waiting, and she seemed everything and wasn't. 3 days. That's how long Henry VIII waited after in Boleyn's execution. 3 days later, he was engaged to another woman. Her name was Jane Seymour. If it had been fire, Jane was calm water. Soft-spoken, modest, obedient. She didn't challenge the king. She didn't flirt with power. She didn't try to outshine him. She did something far more strategic. She made him feel safe. Jane had watched Anne's rise and her fall. She understood something that the others did not. Survival at court required invisibility disguised as virtue. Henry was now in his mid-40s. He had been wounded in a jousting accident years earlier. His leg festered with chronic pain. His temper grew darker. His body heavier. His patience thinner. But his obsession remained unchanged. A son, Jane became pregnant quickly. This time, the court barely breathed. No celebration, no bold predictions, just waiting. And in October 1537, it happened. A healthy baby boy was born, Edward, the long-awaited male heir. Church bells rang across England. Bonfires burned. Henry wept publicly. For the first time, he had what he believed God had denied him. And for the first time in years, he was truly happy. But joy in Tudor England was fragile. Jane fell ill shortly after childbirth. Infection, fever, weakness. 12 days later, she was dead. She had given Henry what none of the others could, and it cost her life. Henry mourned her more than any wife before or after. He chose to be buried beside her decades later. But here's the haunting question. Did Jane win? She avoided disgrace. She avoided execution. She secured her place in history as the mother of a king. But she never lived to see the world she helped create. Henry had his son, and once again, he was free to marry. But this time, something had shifted. The king was older, more paranoid, more ruthless, and the next marriage would not be about love. It would be about politics, and it would become one of the most humiliating chapters of his life. After Jane's death, Henry retreated into grief. But England needed alliances. The Protestant Reformation was reshaping Europe. Catholic powers loomed as threats. Advisors urged the king to secure a strategic marriage. Enter Anne of Cleves. She was a German noblewoman from the Duchy of Cleves, politically valuable, Protestant, and safe. Henry had never met her. Instead, he relied on a portrait painted by Hans Holbein the Younger. In the painting, she appeared refined, attractive, regal. Henry approved. The marriage contract was signed before they ever met. And then, the moment of truth. In January 1540, Henry rode to meet his bride in disguise, hoping to surprise her romantically. It did not go as planned. He was disappointed. Some accounts claim he found her unattractive. Others suggest the chemistry simply wasn't there. Whatever the truth, Henry was furious, not just at her, but at the situation. He felt trapped. The marriage went ahead anyway, and it was a disaster from the beginning. Henry claimed he could not consummate the marriage. Within 6 months, he sought an annulment. But here is where Anne did something remarkable. She didn't resist. She didn't fight. She agreed. She accepted the annulment peacefully. In return, Henry granted her wealth, property, and the title the king's sister. She lived comfortably in England for the rest of her life. Let that sink in. She arrived a foreign bride. She left as a respected royal figure. Alive, independent, untouched by scandal. She understood something critical. You cannot win against a king who wants out, but you can negotiate your survival. Anne of Cleves didn't escape through passion or rebellion. She escaped through pragmatism. But Henry was not done marrying. In fact, he was about to make one of his most reckless decisions yet. Because while he was divorcing Anne, he was already infatuated with someone else. Someone much younger. Someone dangerously naive. Before we leave this story behind, before we compress 6 lives into a rhyme that school children chant without thinking about the blood beneath it, we need to slow down. Because this was never just about 6 wives. It was about what happens when one man holds too much power for too long. When Henry VIII first took the throne, he was everything a Renaissance king was supposed to be. Athletic, educated, devout, magnetic. He wrote music. He debated theology. He hunted, jousted, dazzled foreign ambassadors. Europe admired him. England adored him. He was not born a monster. And that is what makes the story far more unsettling. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded slowly, marriage by marriage, loss by loss, humiliation by humiliation. And at the center of it all was fear, not the fear of death, the fear of irrelevance. The Tudor dynasty was new, fragile, built on the wreckage of civil war. Henry's father had taken the crown through battle, not divine inevitability. The memory of instability was fresh in England's bones. A weak succession could ignite everything again. Henry knew that. He grew up knowing that. So when pregnancy after pregnancy failed to produce a surviving son, it wasn't just disappointment. It was terror. Every miscarriage felt like a crack in the foundation of his rule. Every stillbirth felt like divine commentary. Every daughter, in his mind, felt like a question mark hanging over the future of the realm. And slowly, the charming prince became something else. Obsession does not look dangerous at first. It looks determined, focused, justified. But when obsession meets absolute authority, it mutates. By the time he sought to end his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry had already begun redefining reality to suit his needs. Scripture became a tool. Theology became a weapon. Conscience became flexible. When Rome refused him, he did not bend. He broke the church. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. Think about the magnitude of that decision. A king rewriting centuries of religious order because he believed his marriage displeased God and because he desired another woman. That level of conviction requires either extraordinary courage or extraordinary ego. Once he had separated England from Rome, there was no higher earthly authority left to restrain him, no pope to deny him, no external power to contradict him. From that moment on, Henry did not just rule England. He ruled its faith. And when a man controls both the sword and salvation, who dares oppose him? Fear became currency at court. Ministers who rose quickly fell faster. Loyalties shifted like sand. Smiles concealed calculations. Words were weighed before they were spoken. A single accusation could become a death sentence. Even the most powerful men were not immune. Thomas More, once Henry's trusted advisor, was executed for refusing to acknowledge him as head of the church. Thomas Cromwell, architect of the Reformation itself, was later destroyed when the political winds changed. If the king's closest allies could be erased, what protection did a wife truly have? And the wives knew. Every one of them understood, at least in part, the risk they were taking. Catherine of Aragon believed righteousness would protect her. She underestimated how far Henry would go, and Boleyn believed influence would secure her position. She underestimated how quickly desire could turn into resentment. Jane Seymour believed obedience would guarantee stability. She underestimated how fragile life was in the 16th century. And of Cleves understood something critical. Survival sometimes means surrender. She read the danger and stepped aside. Catherine Howard underestimated everything. Youth does not recognize cliffs until it is falling. Catherine Parr understood the stakes completely. She navigated theology, ego, and politics like a tightrope walker over a pit of knives. Each wife reflects a phase of Henry's psychological evolution. When he was young and hopeful, he sought legitimacy and alliance. When he was passionate and impatient, he sought excitement. When he was desperate for redemption, he sought gentleness. When he was politically cornered, he sought strategy. When he felt his age creeping in, he sought youth to mirror what he had lost. When he approached death, he sought intellect and legacy. His marriages were not random. They were emotional reactions to his own insecurities. And as his body declined, so did his temperament. After his jousting accident in 1536, something undeniably shifted. Chronic pain changes a person. Untreated injuries fester, not just physically, but mentally. Contemporary descriptions speak of ulcers that never healed, of foul-smelling wounds, of increasing immobility. The once athletic king grew heavy, restricted, dependent. And dependency is intolerable to a man who built his identity on dominance. So he compensated, through control, through punishment, through spectacle. Portraits from his later reign show a massive, immovable figure planted wide, legs apart, shoulders squared. It was not accidental. It was projection, power painted larger than life to conceal decay beneath velvet and jewels. But no portrait can silence time, and time was merciless. By his final years, Henry had achieved almost everything he set out to accomplish. He had a male heir. He had reshaped England's religious identity. He had consolidated royal authority beyond what his predecessors could have imagined. And yet, he was surrounded not by love, but by caution, not by intimacy, but by calculation. The women who shared his bed also shared a silent awareness. Affection was conditional. Imagine waking each morning knowing that the king's mood could determine your fate. Imagine knowing that rumors, true or false, could be manufactured into treason. Imagine understanding that your body was not entirely your own, that its success or failure in producing a son might define whether you lived or died. This was not romance. It was proximity to power. And proximity to power is rarely safe. But perhaps the most tragic layer of all lies not in the wives, but in the children. Mary, forced to deny her mother's marriage to survive. Elizabeth, declared illegitimate after her mother's execution. Edward, burdened from birth with the expectations of a kingdom desperate for male continuity. They grew up not in a stable household, but in a political storm. They learned early that affection could be revoked, that titles could be stripped, that identity itself could be rewritten by decree. And history, with its strange irony, would later reveal something Henry never fully grasped. The dynasty he feared losing without a son would be immortalized not by Edward, but by Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, the child whose mother he condemned. Power seeks certainty. History delivers unpredictability. Henry tried to control succession through marriage after marriage. He bent religion, law, and loyalty toward a single goal: permanence. Yet permanence cannot be forced. It can only be shaped over time. And as the years narrowed toward his death, the king who once dominated Europe physically could no longer mount a horse without assistance. The man who once danced and jousted was carried in chairs. The sovereign who once radiated vitality now relied on fear to maintain authority. Fear works, but isolates. When Henry VIII died in 1547, he left behind a transformed England, a nation permanently altered in its religious identity, a monarchy strengthened in power but haunted by instability, a court conditioned to obedience, and 6 women whose lives have been forever defined by proximity to him. 2 executed, 2 dead by illness, 1 discarded but prosperous, 1 who outlived him. But even survival carries weight. And if Cleves lived comfortably, yes, but forever marked by a marriage that failed before it began. Catherine Parr escaped execution, yes, but only after narrowly avoiding charges that could have destroyed her. Jane Seymour gave him the son he craved, yes, but at the cost of her own life. No one left untouched. That is the hidden truth behind the rhyme. It simplifies, it sanitizes, it distances us from the human cost. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. 6 words to summarize decades of anxiety, ambition, manipulation, fear, and blood. But when you strip away the poetry, what remains is a study of power unchecked. What remains is a portrait of a man who could command everything except biology, who could bend parliament but not fate, who could silence dissent but not doubt. And perhaps that is why this story endures. Because it is not just about a king and his wives. It is about the illusion of control, about how authority, when absolute, does not eliminate insecurity, it magnifies it. It is about how survival sometimes belongs not to the strongest or the most passionate, but to the most adaptable. And it is about how history remembers outcomes, but rarely pauses to feel the tension that led there. 6 women entered Henry's life at different moments. Each believed, in some way, that her story would end differently. Only one truly walked away while he still breathed. And that distinction, that razor-thin difference between destruction and escape, is what makes this story more than royal gossip. It makes a study in human nature. Now, with all of that in mind, we can finally confront the ending and the truth behind the rhyme that turned tragedy into memory. She was probably 17. He was nearly 50. Her name was Catherine Howard, a cousin of Anne Boleyn. Youthful, flirtatious, vibrant, where Anne of Cleves had been political, Catherine Howard was impulsive. Henry was enchanted. After years of illness and insecurity, she made him feel young again. He showered her with jewels, lavish gifts, public affection. He called her his rose without a thorn. But Catherine carried secrets. Before her marriage, she had engaged in relationships with other men. In Tudor England, that history could be dangerous. At court, she may have continued reckless behavior, perhaps even affairs. Whether exaggerated or true, it didn't matter. Her enemies were watching. And once suspicion reached the king, the machinery of destruction began again. Interrogations, confessions extracted, accusations multiplied. Catherine Howard was arrested for treason, the same charge that destroyed her cousin. In 1542, she was executed at the Tower of London. Witnesses say she practiced placing her head on the block beforehand. She was a teenager. Henry, now older and more volatile than ever, withdrew into rage and humiliation. 2 wives executed, 2 dead, 1 divorced, and yet, unbelievably, there was still one more. And this final wife would do something no other had fully accomplished. She would survive the king, but not by accident, by intelligence. By the time Catherine Parr entered Henry's life, she already understood loss. She had been widowed twice. She was educated, deeply Protestant, politically aware, and she did not enter this marriage naively. She knew exactly what had happened to the others. Imagine standing at the altar, knowing 2 women before you had been executed. Would you have said yes? Catherine Parr did, but she played a different game. Instead of competing with Henry, she supported him publicly while quietly influencing policy behind the scenes. She fostered unity among his children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward. She encouraged education, especially for Elizabeth, who would later become one of England's greatest monarchs. But Catherine nearly lost everything. Her religious views were considered radical by conservative factions at court. At one point, a warrant was issued for her arrest on charges of heresy. It was ready, prepared, waiting. When she learned of it, Catherine did something brilliant. She approached Henry not as a rival intellectual, but as a humble wife. She framed their theological debates as attempts to distract him from his pain, to comfort him, to learn from him. His ego soothed, Henry withdrew the warrant. She had defused her own execution. Henry VIII died in 1547, and Catherine Parr outlived him. She later remarried for love. She died a year later due to childbirth complications, but she died free, not discarded, not imprisoned, not executed, free. She was the only wife who truly escaped the marriage intact. Divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. A rhyme taught to English school children. But behind that rhyme lies something darker. This wasn't just a story about romance gone wrong. It was about absolute power. Henry VIII reshaped a religion, executed nobles, and altered the future of England, all driven by insecurity and obsession. Each wife reflected a different phase of his transformation. Catherine of Aragon, devotion and legitimacy. And Boleyn, ambition and revolution. Jane Seymour, fulfillment and loss. And of Cleves, diplomacy and negotiation. Catherine Howard, youth and tragedy. Catherine Parr, intellect and survival. And perhaps the most chilling truth of all, the real battlefield was never love. It was succession, control, legacy. So when we say only one escaped, we're not just talking about survival. We're talking about strategy. And if you've made it this far, here's one final question. If you had lived in Tudor England, which wife would you have been? And more importantly, would you have survived?